Back in Destiny 1, we became aware of a secret group labeled as the Nine. Now, we didn't really know too much about them back then, other than that they sent us weapons through a tentacle-faced alien guy named Xur. But as time evolved, many famed guardians and scholars have tried to explain what these creatures are. With the release of Season of the Drifter though, it seems we finally have the answer to who or what the Nine actually are. My name's Evade, and welcome to the channel.
When there is too much darkness in the universe, light must cast it away. And when there is too much light, darkness must drown it out. This truth is our burden. This is what it is to be awoken. The next act is about to begin, and I do not know when I will return. Fear nothing. Bow to no one.
Although the annual pass doesn't include any story missions and levels to further expand the plot up to this point, maybe we'll have something in Penumbra, I do have to say that the lore added from the writing team at Bungie is pretty mind-blowing for Season of the Drifter. So far we've discussed things like Shin's real identity, some Drifter theories, and we have tons more to dive through in the future like Varix, the state of the Fallen, and how the Emissary became the Emissary. But today we're going to focus on a new lore book in particular called Dust. This book is really interesting as it follows a cryptarch named Lavinia who is studying and trying to learn more about what the Nine actually are, and the results are pretty insane. So many things happen in this book. I'm not going to read all the lore cards like I do in some certain videos. I'm just going to read a couple of them and get to the most important parts about the Nine. Most of this book though is Lavinia trying to uncover secrets about the Nine through audio files of Xur, logs from ships, and so on. She first begins in the tower where she talks to Xur for a bit, and then she goes undercover when everybody kinda goes home and listens to some audio file records from Xur at the tower. She ends up getting caught by Master Rahul, and then Ikor talks to her about this Ahamkara bone she had in her possession, and she also asks her questions about why she was snooping around looking for these files. At that point, Ikor is like, hey, you can either go back to your class, things will be fine, or I'm gonna have to take some action here and take this Ahamkara bone away from you. Lavinia wants to know about the Nine so badly that she decides she'll take the chance, and Ikor exiles her from the last safe city. Some of the cards after that details the journey she goes on to try and find out this new intel about the Nine and what they are. So she first finds herself here at the reef where she meets a friendly Fallen who serves her a nice cup of tea. At that point, the Fallen and her discuss a bit, and he shows her a clip from when Skolas was in the prison, just waiting there to die. Now I'll explain that in a bit as it is pretty interesting. But shortly after listening to this clip, an Awoken guard comes in, takes her to an Awoken warship which is heading towards the Leviathan. On their approach, they run into some large amounts of dark matter surrounding the ship, and this sort of sends things into disarray. Lavinia said this is the Nine. They're looking at Callus. They're reaching out. These are their hands. We then fast forward and things are getting a little bit more interesting. So Lavinia ends up at this weird gate aboard a space station that has been abandoned for a very long time. This gate was mentioned back in Destiny 1 and it's really cool that they went back to it here, but in this space station Lavinia searches through more logs and believes that the Nine are on the other side of this gate. After frantically searching for more evidence about this dark matter and what the heck is going on in the space station, the Awoken forces come up to her and they're about to take her back to prison. At this point she realizes like, hey, I can either spend the rest of my life in a cell or risk suicide trying to find out what's on the other side of this portal. So she leapt through. So that's a summary of about 6 cards briefly there, but I'm going to read the last 2 which detail the most important information about the Nine and what they possibly are. Lavinia comprehends the Nine. They were already ancient when the first human beings named themselves. Their flesh was older than stars, the dark dust wind that blows through the galaxy, pinched by the gravity of Sol and its planets, drawn into their cores and exhaled again. These were the Nine. In time, loops did form. Great arcs of outbound dust collapsed back to their sources to create circuits of shadow. The thickening and thinning of these circuits were the first thoughts of the Nine. They dwelt in massive indifference, unborn primordial gods. There was no force among them except gravity, no structure except the distribution of mass. Their hearts were in the cores of these worlds, but their farthest streams faded out into the turn of the galaxy. They were the fountains of Eclipse, the night before chaos. But life arose on the worlds of the heart of the Nine, tiny complicated motions of ecosystems and metabolisms and computations. That life left mass shadows in the wind of the Nine, plucking at them like harp strings. From these trembles of structure, the Nine learned to seed enormous resonating waves, thoughts faster than worlds. So the Nine awoke, and in time they understood that they were as fragile as they were mighty, for if the life they seeded their thoughts ever passed away, they would too vanish. They had no eyes to catch light, they had no ears to hear, and yet they turned their wills upon the alien world of matter and strove to learn, for they knew that they had to protect their hearts or die. With a horror revelation so absolute that it would drive her mad if she still had sanity to lose, Lavinia understands where the Nine have always been. They are within everyone, every system, every living and moving thing. Trillions and pentillions of slim dark matter tentacles plunge through all of our bodies, drinking up the complexity of our lives and thoughts. We are all pinched silhouettes impaled on the twitchlings of indefinitely long spider legs. Came now the Traveler, and with it a strange hope, for the Traveler's light had the power to cause without causation. If the Nine had the light, they could seed their own minds, free themselves from the dependence on matter, life. They could gain forces beyond gravity to structure themselves, and so become more than wraiths of dark dust. They could enter the mad alien superworld of our chemical reality. So the Nine turned to this new hope, and they were divided. Lavinia then hears a voice call to her saying this is not safe, you gotta get out of there, and she continues to learn what's going on. Not safe? No, of course she is not safe, because there are factions among the Nine. One faction sent Xur and Orn to study Guardians and the Light, to seek the secretive effect without cause, and to protect the source of that secret, the last source now that the Ahamkara are gone. Those five played at alchemy with the Cocytus gates, turning dark dust into energy and then into matter, but they could not unlock the secrets of our mad existence. They needed ambassadors, go-betweens. The other faction walks a different path, a path of folds and needles slipped through space-time itself, existential syringes yielding new spaces to be remade as the Nine desire. They have tried to gather enough dark dust in one place to form a black hole, and found it difficult. When dark mass collapses in gravity's fist, the dust passes through itself and scatters. But difficult is not impossible, and there is far, far more dark matter in the universe than bright. They will find a way to make new worlds of it. They will end their dependence on life, and on the light of Guardians, which the falling veil will soon snuff out forever. So then there's a little bit more information about Lavinia getting kind of sucked through this portal sometime in the path, which is kind of weird. And then she also details some stuff about Mara's interactions with the Nine, which we'll talk about in a moment. So this is definitely pretty crazy, right? This essentially tells us who the Nine are and how they came to be. Well, at least the basis of it all. I'm sure there's still tons of questions you have, and I do as well, but Bungie's definitely going to keep some things hidden for the sake of the story progressing and so on. So from what we can gather, the Nine began as this sort of dark matter dust that formed around the 9 bodies or planets in our solar system, and by that I mean the 8 planets and then possibly the 9th being our sun. The 9 themselves realized they were super fragile and needed more intelligent life to survive, to try and make themselves evolve, so to speak. Now back when Lavinia was at the reef like I mentioned previously, she listened to a clip where Skolas said some things in his cell. Here's what he said. Mara, Skolas' mouth was not made for that name. Mara, do you hear? The Queen of the Reef sentenced him to the fate of all fallen, Lavinia's companion sighs. To strive and struggle and fail. But he was already lost. His mind broke at the Citadel where he saw into time. Skolas blows white vapor, frost crackles on his mask. You gifted me to the 9, and they sent me back. People think you are a fool, that you've made an error releasing me. Led your people to die in my blade as I led my people to die on yours. The 9's agent never told me why he released me. Now I know, you know also I think. Both of you require guardians, and the 9 do not understand life and death, so they sent me back to you to make guardians come. They did not comprehend the harm. I do not comprehend them either. I traveled among the Jovians for years in their domain. But I do not know the 9. You, Marasav, are the only one who bargains with them. You are the only one who has foreseen their role in the game. You keep your success a secret so the world only knows your mistakes. No wonder I underestimated you." He then continues on a little bit. "I saw the shape of the Nine on Venus, a place that was once precious to them where wishes could transfigure their flesh. I saw that they are bound to this star and to these worlds. You are kind in that way, you and the Nine. Not I. I will be glad to leave this world, Marasov. I am tired of being a pawn." So that is definitely, in my opinion, one of the best parts about this whole lore book. Yes, we get stuff about the Nine, but Skolas says all of this, which reveals some of the questions we've been asking forever now. Why did the Nine give him back? Skolas essentially says that Mara and the Nine required the Guardians. They need us to further their plans, and this makes 100% complete sense. So the Nine were these dust matter particles, and it sort of became parts of the planets. In order for their consciousness to survive this system, the places they were born needed to be protected. If life here died, they couldn't learn from the intelligent life and possibly learn how to become one with this reality. Something then arrived that sparked hope in their minds, the Traveler and the Light. They thought to themselves, if the Nine can use the light, they could seed their own minds, free themselves from the dependence on matter and even life. So with this goal in mind, they needed to figure out a way of how to use the light. How can they make themselves become physical, evolve what they currently are, and so on. And we see a perfect example of this during back in the Red War. The card essentially tells us that the Nine blinded the Guardians about Gaul so they can learn how to steal the light and equip it for themselves. Now, did they? I'm not sure, but they definitely had a big part in spawning the whole war in the first place. The second huge thing to note is that the Nine is divided into two factions. One of them seems kind of good, the other one seems a little bit evil and more tied to the darkness, but who knows. Here's what we have in each of the factions. So the first faction sends Zur and Orn to study the Guardians and the Light, to seek out the secret of effect without cause to protect the source of that secret, the last source now that the Ahamkara are gone. These 5 who were a part of the Nine are the ones using this gate to try and make physical forms aboard that space station. This would allow them to enter into our realm in physical form, but they haven't really figured out how to do that yet. This is the whole reason they send messengers like Orn and Zur in the first place. In the other faction, we have the remaining 4 of the Nine who walk a different path, a darker one it seems. These 4 are attempting to gather enough of this dark dust to form a black hole. They will find a way to make new worlds of it. They will end their dependence on life and on the light of Guardians, which the falling veil will soon snuff out forever. Also, a little side note, the Nine mention the Ahamkara in these cards, and we even see the interaction with Ikora and the Bone, where they say this: Zur didn't appear in the tower until after the great Ahamkara hunt. So this possibly could imply that Zur was created by the Nine from an Ahamkara wish. Pretty cool. So Guardians, hope this clears things up a little bit. No, there's still tons of questions, and that's kind of how it's always going to be with a story like this, but the Nine were essentially space dust particles that basically existed everywhere and within the 8 bodies and sun in our solar system. They realized how fragile they were, and then they found the Traveler. With this light, they realized they can evolve what they are, make possible physical forms to enter our realm, and maybe even out of that gate on the abandoned space station near Ceres. But that's just one side of the Nine. There are 2 factions, and the other has a much different plan, and we may discuss that in a future video. Anyway, Guardians, thank you so much for watching. If you'd like to see other videos just like this one, be sure to subscribe to the channel. Anyway, my name's Evade, and I'll catch you Guardians in the next one.